everyone. Welcome to this BAKERpedia seminar all about cake and indulgence. I'm Dr. Lynn, your host for today. This seminar is brought to you by Select Custom Solutions. Select Custom Solutions offers an extensive range of ingredients and blends for the bakery industry, including low-carb milk replacers, egg white and whole egg alternatives, protein blends, specialty blends, and bulk bakery blends. They offer product lines specifically for the baking industry, including baking ingredients, PZ dough conditioners, and ready sponge dough developers to help customers create the perfect balance of product performance, modernization, and quality. Also brought to you by Icon Foods. Natural sweetener alternatives are intuitive to them. Knowing how to use sweeteners by themselves and synergistically with others to replace sugar or reduce calories is instinctive to them, whether in bars, beverages, confections, or desserts. And today's seminar is brought to you by BAKERpedia. We are here for the 3 a.m. dough mixers, the meticulous formulators, the budding small business owners, diligent production worker like yourselves, aspiring food science students, scientists, and every baking food industry professional. We're here and we are here to educate you, inspire and empower, and we envision a world where accessible knowledge fosters nutritious, affordable, and convenient food production. So this is important to us. We are located here in Portland, Oregon, USA, and we operate with a global network of dedicated team members and collaborators. So thank you for being part of our community today, and we hope to add to your base with this webinar. We will now share a presentation about cake production and indulgence. Cake and indulgence. What do we know about cake and indulgence today? Well, we know that it is a market, but did you know that it's a $65.7 billion market? As of last year, the CAGR is 3%. So it's still growing, and it's still growing at a pretty stable rate. It's been about 3 to 3.5% in the last few years. And along with other baked goods, cakes are always popular among a wide range of consumers. There are currently some notable trends in the market that are changing traditional cake consumption. Today, we are going to talk about cakes, all about cakes, kinds of cakes, better in foam, keto, gluten-free. Okay, the demand for healthier and more nutritious cake options is a recent shift in the cake industry. This trend has led to increased production of alternative sweeteners and alternative flours such as rice, tapioca, almond, or coconut flour. The texture, the types of cakes. So why do I touch on this? Basically, the kinds of cakes found in the US is very different from the rest of the world, okay? And I think the history of how we produce cakes and how we have the accessibility to more sugar, to more butter, to more different kinds of fat, and the ability to chlorinate our flour has led us to produce a different kind of cake from the rest of the world. So let me touch on that a little bit. So the texture of cakes can range from really light and airy to dense and moist, right? For the dense and moist type, we have the batter cakes. The difference is really in the processing of these cakes. For the batter type, which is an oil and water emulsion, and because their fat and sugar content are really typically higher than the flour level, bakers tend to cream the fat and sugar first to start, okay? Then they will slowly add in the liquids and other dry ingredients. These are the types of cakes that can be processed in your oak machines and is highly stable throughout the entire processing step. And this is why I suspect this is the reason why American cakes are mostly of the better kind. Okay, better type cakes are also the best for frozen batter application. Okay, for foam cakes, the egg whites are usually whipped separately from the egg yolks, right? And this is how angel food cakes are produced. Angel food cakes do not require fat. Sponge and chiffon cakes, which are also foam type, gets their fat content mostly from eggs and from oil and egg yolks, typically. Usually made with the flour before introduction into the wheat mixture. So ingredients do play a crucial role in both batter and foam type cakes. So let's talk more about this. Okay, first thing I want to touch is flour. Okay, that's the most important thing. Without a good flour, you're not going to get a good cake. All right, next we're going to the major ingredients that are the sugar and fat. And then we go to the minor ingredients, which are the chemical leavening, eggs, emulsifiers, and preservatives. Don't get me wrong, they are minor, but they play a major role in cake production. Okay, let's talk about cake flour. All right, so most cake flour is made from soft wheat here in the US. Okay, so you may know that soft wheat is used for cake and noodles. You know, in the Pacific Northwest, we grow a lot of soft wheat, right? So we are kind of like the soft wheat capital of the world, of the United States, and we export a lot of soft wheat over to Asia. And a lot of people use our soft wheat for noodles and cake production as well. Soft wheat growth in the Pacific Northwest is pretty abundant because we have the right climate and temperature for it. And because of that, it's great at producing protein content that is less than 10%. And that's what we need for soft wheat flour. Okay. And if you were, I'm sure you have tried using higher protein flour for cakes before. If you haven't tried using bread flour for cakes, you understand, that higher protein content means chewier cakes, denser cakes. Okay, this is why soft wheat with a protein content of less than 10% makes good indulgent treat that require a lighter, more tender crumb. So cake flour is often chlorinated, and it's a process that involves treating flour with a small dose of chlorine gas. So what does this small dose do? When you bleach with chlorine to a level of 4.4 to 4.8, and this is what the millers have to do to target this range, it lowers the gelatinization temperature of the starch within the flour. So why is this important, right? This lowering of the gelatinization temperature oxidizes some of the starch and protein molecules in the flour, and it increases the acidity of the flour and therefore increases its water absorption capacity. So because there's so much sugar in there, you have to make the flour function to absorb that water, right? So only chlorinated flour can do that. And when you do that, then you'll have a good fluffy cake. If you don't use chlorinated flour with a high ratio flour, with a high ratio formula, then you'll get a dense collapsed cake, okay? Chlorinated flour is key. So cake flour treated by chlorination results in baked goods with a finer crumb plus a soft and tender texture. Okay, so you may ask, basically, what how is this going to affect gluten-free and keto, right? Okay, let's talk about gluten-free. Gluten-free, you don't have soft wheat flour, right? So you have flour like tapioca, you have flour like rice, sorghum, right? So it's actually better for cake production. And most gluten-free uh, formulas would already have pre-gelatinized starch and also hydrocolloids that would give that structure to deal with the high amount of sugar and fat in the system. So if you take any of our formulations in the book and just replace it with your gluten-free flour, you'll find that it would actually work better, for this particular segment. Now, if you're gonna bake keto, it's like fabulous, right? Uh, you know, do you know why? Okay, maybe you can ask this question later. But keto means no sugar. No sugar means no interference with the starch gelatinization temperature of the wheat flour. You can actually use regular flour. You might not even need to use chlorinated flour. Okay, so that's the difference between these systems and the kinds of flour. Okay, hope that makes it easy to understand for you. Okay, so we touch on the next two important ingredients because these are really high in dosage in a lot of the high ratio cake formulations. And high ratio cake is probably about 85% of the market here in the US. Okay, so sugar is needed in cake production. It provides the sweetness and helps to create a moist and tender texture. Therefore, if you were to cut away the sugar, this is the number one issue that you have to deal with, the moist and tender texture. Okay, sugar is also used for the Maillard reaction for browning and aroma. In some cake types, it contributes to the leavening due to the creaming step with the butter. The sugar content in high ratio cakes is higher than the flour content, usually at about 55 to 60% of total formulation weight. Yes, that's right. 60% of your total formula is sugar. That's how much it is in high ratio cakes. All right. These affect the stability of the cake if the flour is not chlorinated or pre-gelled, like I said. And this is why when you develop for gluten-free, high ratio works better in gluten-free cakes due to the amount of pre-gelatinized starches and hydrocolloids. Sugar product tender structure by decreasing starch gelatinization and water activity. And if you're substituting sugar for a keto formulation, you may have to use inulin, natural or artificial sweeteners, and baking soda. Use them as a blend to improve the Maillard reaction for browning. And for that instance, baking scientists use a little bit more baking soda to really get that browning. But we go back into the chemical leavening and pH of the system. If you were to use too much baking soda for browning, you're going to affect the volume as well. So a lot of research needs to go into that before you launch anything. You can also use other ingredients. I mean, Maillard reaction is due to protein and reducing sugar. Okay, increase your reducing sugar and you increase your protein, you are going to get browning regardless of what system you're at. Okay, so fat plays an important role in cake production too. The most common kinds of vegetable oils, margarine, butter, or shortening. The main contribution of fat in cakes is a tenderizer. Basically, they coat the flour particles and they break up the gluten network and starch networks to make sure that the bite is short. Okay, so that is really important when it comes to let's not forget the function of fat in the shelf life of the cake. Without fat, your cake over shelf life is going to stale faster. It's going to be more crumbly. And an increase in fat content would improve the texture of the cake, making it less crumbly, offering a longer shelf life. Usually when my customers complain that their cakes are getting dry and stale, I would actually recommend pre first in a cake before introducing enzymes and emulsifiers, because who knows? I mean, just 1% might solve your problem, right? So fat lubricates the palate and enhances the moisture of your cake products. All right. One of my favorite topics is chemical leavening, okay? Or as most people like to say, baking powder, right? But a lot of the bakers who are scaling up right now don't understand baking powder. They think it's like yeast. There's only one kind, right? So it's not. Okay, baking powder is made out of a leavening acid and a base. When you put them together, then they produce the gas. Okay, so there's a whole science behind this. Okay, so follow the links in the book and you get to learn a little bit more about the science behind chemical leavening. And you understand what neutralizing value is. Basically, your acid base need to neutralize each other to get that gas. Okay, if you don't neutralize each other, guess what? You're gonna get an imbalanced system. You're gonna get more base, and it's gonna taste alkali, and it's gonna taste funny, and you won't get the volume, or you're gonna get too much acidity in the cake, and it's not going to give you the volume, and it's gonna taste sour. Okay, so you got to get the right leavening acid, and you got to get the right base, get them to react, and then boom, the magic happens. Okay, a lot of our chemical leaveners or leavening acids in the market right now are sodium based, right? Sodium sodium acid pyrophosphate, sodium aluminum pyrophosphate, so these sodium ions of the leavening acids are bringing up the sodium content in your cakes, right? And some of you might be in a state where I need to get the sodium out. I've gone down as much as I can on my salt. What can I do? Okay, so this is why I want to feature our sponsor here today, Inifus. They have a Lever system where you can actually reduce the sodium in your chemical leavening application. And you can do that without affecting the neutralizing value, the reaction rates, and the volume. Okay, so don't do it on yourself. Reach out to them and ask their team, what's the best replacement and how can I do this? Do I need to change any part of my process? Okay, so basically Inifus also have a aluminum-free baking powder if that concerns you. And if it doesn't concern you, that's fine. But I still think that in order to cater to your customers, basically, people like Whole Foods, right? Some of the natural grocers, they don't want aluminum. So you have to bake without aluminum. Like you're not given a choice, right? So whatever your customer wants, just know that there are aluminum-free solutions. All right, let's talk a little bit about eggs. Eggs is eggs, right? Well, eggs are magical, okay? They provide the foaming ability and structure of the cake. They act as binding agents, keeping the gases in and helping the cake set during baking, therefore providing the volume, right? If you need more volume, put in more eggs, right? More eggs, more volume, but guess what? It's expensive, okay? Eggs also provide moisture, which contributes to the softness and tenderness of the final product. Provide one of the substrates that are involved in the browning reaction. It provides the eggy and custardy aroma, right? That's all part of the Maillard reaction. That's why when you produce vegan cakes, you're like, oh my God, does not taste like the cakes that are with eggs, right? This is the issue with vegan cakes, right? You're just not getting that Maillard reaction with the eggs, right? Let's talk about eggs in cheesecakes. Cheesecakes is like a big market here in the US. It sells the most in food service and also in the freezer section. Okay, it's a huge, huge market. In cheesecakes, they function mainly in the structure and denseness of the product, right? So if you don't use eggs in cheesecake, you're not going to get the setting, right? You're going to get like a soupy mess of cream cheese. And I know you've tried this before because I've seen soupy cream cheesecake, right? When I see soupy cream cheese cheesecake, I say, add more eggs, right? And when I get the pushback on eggs are too expensive, then I talk more about the egg replacement strategies, okay? So no eggs, no setting in cheesecake. That's just it, plain and simple. So if you want to try to reduce eggs, then, we have a whole topic dedicated to egg replacement. Go look at it at our encyclopedia pages, okay? So at home, as a home baker, you can replace eggs with applesauce, yogurt, flaxseed, or allergen, vegan allergen-friendly mixes, right? On the industrial scale, you have chia flour, you have whey powder, you have, some of the hydrocolloids that you could use. So basically, understand that eggs are essential in cakes. Don't mess around with it, okay? So here I bring you the wonderful world of emulsifiers. Okay, you're like, Lynn, I don't need this. I don't want this on my label. I don't care for this. Hey, I understand. If you are like a retail baker, you don't need this. But if you're using the Oaks machine, or if you're like freezing your batter to get better distribution in food service, if you're looking at producing food service cakes and snack cakes that require a longer sitting time in your process room, you need emulsifiers, okay? And these are the best, right? These are the typically used PGMEs, PGMEs are like the go-to gold standard, okay? So if you don't like the sound of that, I don't know what to tell you. PGEs are also the same thing. Polysorbate 60. I don't understand how some people don't want to use PGMEs, don't want to use PGE, but perfectly fine with polysorbates, right? But that's okay. That's another discussion altogether. Polysorbate 60s are emulsifiers used to improve the crumb color and strength of your cakes, okay? So the number 60 represents the fatty acid associated with the polyxethylene sorbiton component of the molecule. The higher this number is, indicates that it's more fat loving. So if your cakes have a lot of fat, go up on that polysorbate number, okay? Let's talk, if you want to know more about these particular ingredients, they are in the book, and the book has the link to go to the different topics, okay? Alpha cyclodextrins are very new in the market, and I want to spend some time talking about them because to me, they're really innovative. They are corn-based. And it's if you go through BAKERpedia's library, I talked to the scientists that produce alpha dextrins on YouTube, and he basically told me it's like a donut shaped head with a lipophilic tail, right? So basically, they created this particular emulsifier to replace eggs, and it just is very amazing. I've seen it turn oil and water into actually a angel cake foam, right? So with that kind of power in this alpha cyclodextrin, it can do anything, right? So this is why I'm saying this is a really innovative ingredient. Take a look at it. It's produced by Wacker Chemicals, and if they have the technology you want to sample, just go ahead and reach out to them. Do reach out to them, tell them that you heard their ingredients being used on our seminar. All right. So next one would be mono and diglycerides. So mono and diglycerides are like the grandparents of the industry, right? They've been dependable, right? So if you don't want to use anything else, right, mono and diglycerides are the ones to go to as really emulsifiers for your system. Okay, reach out to your makes provider and ask them, do you have clean label emulsifiers? Because I want a clean label emulsifiers. Just remember, the options are usually not cheap and you have to use a lot of it. Okay, so these are the tips that I would like to share with you in terms of emulsifier and emulsifier replacement. Okay, let's talk about the reason why I picked this out as a topic to discuss and to present on is because we have a lot of question on shelf life. And the reason we have a lot of question on shelf life is we have a lot of cake bakers out there, artisan cake bakers, who have fabulous tasting cakes that don't last more than 2 days. Okay, so when they try to increase their distribution, mold, oxidation, these are the things, right? So if you're a cake baker and you're scaling up, you need to add some kind of preservative into your cake, whether you like it or not, so that you can provide a food safe cake that your customers won't be eating mold. Okay, so these things are to prevent your customers from eating mold, because once they buy your cake, that's not the end of it. They will bring it home. They will put it in their fridge for the next week. Okay, so you need to ensure that from the point that you bake your cake to the point where they consume, that it's mold free. So how do you do this? You do this through preservatives. Preservatives like potassium sorbate, um, cultured wheat, all these things that will help you prevent mold growth. Okay, so mold spores are everywhere. Sometimes in your production area, it's just really hard to get rid of mold spores. But do they grow on your product? Yes, if given the opportunity, they will grow on your product. So you need these additives to stop them from growing. Okay. Rowan berry is important because it's been recent that they got this extract out of rowan berries, and it shows a very natural form of sorbate, and that's what you actually use for sorbic acid. Rowan berry, and this is something that J&K Ingredients would have as well. So ask them for this sorbate, and they will definitely provide more information for you. Okay. Water activity. So let's talk about water activity. In cakes is relatively low compared to bread, but it's higher than cookies and pastries. Okay, so the water activity of cake can be about 0.8, 0.9. And to get it down, you have to add more sugars. You have to add more emulsifiers and fat. So if that is not the route you want to take, then you have to add preservatives. Okay, so you can measure the water activity sending your samples off to a food lab. Okay, if that's too expensive for you over time, because it will get expensive over time. I think probably about 50 to 100 water activity lab samples would buy you a new water activity meter. So think about that. Okay, get a water activity meter in-house to do shelf life studies. That would be worth it, I think. So with emulsifiers, if you don't have emulsifiers, your cake is not going to last over 7 days. Okay. And the reason why I say this is, do you see the cakes here on your screen? This is one of the most popular cakes in Europe. They have a shelf life of 6 months. Okay. So, you know, they can't get there without emulsifiers. Emulsifiers and particularly antioxidants. Okay, and these two need to go hand in hand to reduce the oxidation and to reduce the crystallization in the frosting. All right. Okay. Enzymes. So enzymes recently have been used to enhance the shelf life of cakes for the reduction in crumbliness. Reduction in crumbliness, if I could say that properly. So that's the thing with enzymes and shelf life is you don't want to lose the customer because your product looks awful. When they cut it, it just disintegrates in front of them, right? So enzyme is going to help with the resilience. Right. So last but not least, let's talk about food safety. When you get to cool your cakes, pack them immediately. Okay, certain climates, certain humidity, that's a different internal temperature. So get to internal temperature where it doesn't, where you can frost it, or it doesn't put extra moisture into the bag or to the packaging. Okay, so pack it as soon as you can. Use gloves as usual. And you might tell me, Lynn, we do all this piece, but I can tell you right now, a lot of bakers are not doing that. Okay, a lot of bakers are still thinking, why is there mold in my food? I want to put in, you know, potassium sorbate, right? So try using gloves first. Using gloves, pack early. Use a proper packaging material. Something, if you could provide something that's nitrogen flushed, you know, that prevents mold growth, that's key, right? So food safe practices, GMPs. Okay, I can't stress enough for that. Okay, so with the processing, it's pretty straightforward. It's usually one step for a lot of the large industrial applications. It's two-step mixing for foam cakes. And basically, if you're creaming and folding in ingredients, that's 2 steps as well. So the Oaks machine is used for homogenization, and that's an awesome tool on the industrial side of things. Next, you're gonna have to deposit your cakes, which is very, very easy to do. And if you're still hand depositing them, try to start looking for like a unifiller or a riser depositor that you could put the batter into the tins. Okay. Finally, when you bake or freeze your batter, you know, you're gonna have different packaging for that. Last but not least, all baked cakes need to be frosted or iced, and then go into packaging. Okay, let's talk a little bit about frozen cakes and batter. Encapsulated baking soda is needed for frozen batters. So we call this end caps in the industry, basically. So you have to encapsulate the baking soda to prevent it from reacting with the leavening acid as you mix and you freeze the dough, freeze the batter, right? Some of you sell frozen muffin, right? This is where you need your end caps. Blast freezing frozen cakes, like whole cakes, is necessary because you want a temperature down as fast as you can. All right. Finally, packaging, use nitrogen flush if you can. If you can't, you know, don't put them in cake boxes. You know, you need some form of packaging to preserve the water in there. Otherwise, the cake is exposed to the atmosphere, and with that comes freezer burns. All right. You don't want that. Water activity is going to hurt you if it's too high. Too high of a water activity encourages oxidation, encourages crystallization. So you want to reduce the water activity or hydrocolloids, all right? You want to watch oxidative reactions with frozen dough, frozen cheesecakes. And how do you know if that's oxidative rancidity, right? You will smell it. You'll literally, it smells worse of a shelf life. You know, you're like, oh, it smells great on the first day I baked it, but 2 weeks after in the freezer, it smells like fish, right? So that's oxidative reactions. Okay, so let's talk about some of the problems that we have with cakes. Basically, the batter is too thick for the system and creates tunnels. You know, there's overmixing in your batter cakes or foam cakes to create a crown top. You know, there is underbaking for the wrinkle tops, and basically you didn't use, you know, the correct flour, or you use not enough of the leavening agent, so you get a dense cake. All right, last but not least, overbaking the cake is a very common problem, dry and crumbly textures. Okay, so we are going into troubleshooting. So if you see this on your screen right now, click on, use your camera to zoom in on a QR code, and it will get you to our guide for you to download. Excuse me. Basically, all these questions here on your screen are answered in the guide. So if you have similar questions, please go to the guide today and download it and see what the solutions are. All right. So this is brought to you by these sponsors. We want to thank these sponsors for coming on and sponsoring the Pocket Guide and the seminar. Thank you. Basically, it's not getting baked, right? That's why it collapsed. Okay. So either your temperature is not up high enough and the heat transfer doesn't get to the center to really set the product. That's why it dips. Okay. So sometimes the dip may not be really that obvious. Sometimes it would just like leveled out. And then when you cool it, it just kind of do this, right? Just you can't really see it until it cools. And again, that's a heat transfer issue. And if you increase the temperature, give actually the best temperature transfer solution would be go in high. Like, so if you have a rotating oven, go in at 400 just for this problem alone. Okay, I'm not talking about any other issues. It could be this person's oven. Go in at 400 for like 5 minutes, and then bring the temperature down to 375 for the rest of the bake. That way you can really get the temperature to the center of the cake and it won't dip. Okay, so that's one solution. And the other solution would be to look at your formulation. Are you using the right kind of starches? Are you using the right kind of flour? Like I said, chlorinated flour is very important in the structure setting. If you don't have the right chlorinated flour, you're gonna have a dip. Basically, if you don't have the right kind of protein structure, it's going to fall. Okay, it's going to shrink. So it really depends on the formulation too, and what kind, you know, how it's hydrated and all that stuff. But one thing that you need to look at first, so get them out of the tins. And next thing is, I've seen this issue with too high of a protein content. Basically, what happens is the protein just captures all the air in there, right? Like whether it's egg or high gluten, no, it's gluten-free. So eggs, or I don't know, your whey, your milk proteins, it captures the air so much that when the air leaves, you know, after the oven spring, it just shrinks. So watch the protein content. It would actually help you if you replace some of the protein content with some of the modified starches. This will prevent the shrinkage. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming on. And I appreciate you today and being part of our community. And I hope the restructuring of our website is going to serve you better. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and we'll see you at our next BAKERview. Bye.